There is a hummingbird in the Peruvian desert that is 93 meters long. It was drawn in a single continuous line, one line, bending through beak and wings and tail feathers, never once crossing itself. The proportions are almost perfect. It has been lying on the desert floor for around 2,000 years, and from the ground it is invisible. Stand beside it, and all you see are shallow furrows of pale earth wandering off into the distance. The bird only becomes a bird from hundreds of meters in the air. The people who drew it had no aircraft, no balloons, no towers. They could never have seen their own masterpiece. So who were they drawing for? And the hummingbird is not alone. Scattered across roughly 450 square kilometers of this desert are hundreds of figures. A spider 46 meters across, a monkey with a spiraling tail, a condor, a killer whale, a bird nearly 300 meters from beak to tail. Around them run more than 800 dead straight lines, some holding their course over hills and gullies for kilometers, and hundreds of giant triangles, trapezoids and spirals. Laid end to end, the markings would stretch more than 1,000 kilometers. By area, this is one of the largest works of art human beings have ever made, and it leaves us 4 questions. Who made this? How, without ever leaving the ground? Why? And why one day did they stop? The who at least is established. Between roughly 100 BC and 800 AD, this strip of coastal Peru belonged to the Nazca, farmers, weavers and potters living in one of the driest places on Earth. Their rivers ran dry for months at a time, some years no rain fell at all, and yet they flourished. They raised Cahuachi, a ceremonial city of adobe pyramids at the desert's edge. They engineered the Puquios, spiraling stone aqueducts that pull groundwater to the surface, so well built that some still work today, 2,000 years on. And they painted the same creatures on their pottery that they drew on their desert, hummingbirds, spiders, killer whales, but they left no writing. Not one word explains the lines. And for centuries after them, almost no one on Earth knew the drawings existed. The drawings simply waited. Spanish chroniclers barely mentioned them. Local people knew of old roads in the desert that led nowhere. In 1926, a Peruvian archaeologist named Toribio Mejia Zesp spotted long straight lines from a foothill and took them for ceremonial paths. Almost nobody noticed. Then, in the 1930s, commercial aircraft began crossing the desert, and passengers looked down at a spider the size of a building. In June 1941, an American historian, Paul Kosok, stood at the end of one line at dusk and watched the sun set almost exactly along it. It was the winter solstice. Kosok called the plane the largest astronomy book in the world. Whether he was right is a fight that continues to this day. But first, how do you draw a perfect giant you cannot see? Here is the strangest part. The how turns out to be simple. The desert floor is covered in dark, rust-colored stones, pebbles coated over millennia in a film of iron oxide. Beneath them lies pale, yellowish ground. Clear the dark stones aside, just 10 or 15 centimeters deep, and you draw a bright line the desert cannot hide. For the straight lines, wooden stakes and a cord sighted stake to stake, and stakes have actually been found at the ends of lines. One carbon dated to the Nazca era. For the figures, small preliminary drawings could be scaled up, section by section. In 1982, the investigator Joe Nickel and a small team reproduced the giant condor at full size using sticks, string and measured cord in days with no aircraft. From a nearby hill it looked essentially perfect. No flight required, ever, but a drawing you can scratch into the ground in days should have vanished in weeks. Instead, these have survived 2,000 years because the Nazca chose, knowingly or not, one of the most stable canvases on the planet. This desert receives only a few millimeters of rain in a year, some years effectively none. The dark stones soak up the sun and hold a cushion of warm air over the surface, softening the wind. Floodwaters rarely touch the raised plateau, there is no frost, and almost no erosion. A mark made on this plain simply stays, which means a single footprint here can last for centuries. Remember that, it will matter later. So the how was never really the mystery. The mystery is the why, and the first great answer came from the stars. Paul Kosok's solstice sunset suggested a calendar, and one woman gave it her life. Maria Reiche, a German-born mathematician, came to the desert as Kosok's assistant in the 1940s and never left. For half a century she mapped the figures meter by meter with tape measure, compass and ladder, and swept them clean alone with a household broom. Locals thought she was mad or a spy. She hired guards with her own money and slept in a small house at the desert's edge. To Reiche, the lines were an astronomical calendar, markers for the solstices and the seasons of water, knowledge a desert people could not live without. When she died in 1998 at 95, Peru buried her with state honors beside the lines. Without her they might not exist at all. But her theory had a problem. In 1968, The astronomer Gerald Hawkins, fresh from running Stonehenge through a computer, did the same to Nazca. He fed in the directions of dozens of lines and asked how many pointed at the sun, the moon, or bright stars on significant dates. The answer was deflating, no more than chance would predict. Later studies came to broadly the same conclusion. A handful of alignments, like Cossack's solstice line, do appear real, but a handful is not a calendar. The theory that made the lines famous could not carry their weight. And in that same year, 1968, a very different book about Nazca appeared and sold millions of copies. It claimed the artists were not drawing for the sky. It claimed they were drawing for someone in it. Erich von Däniken's Chariots of the Gods proposed that the great trapezoids were landing strips for extraterrestrial craft, the lines, a message to visitors from space. It is worth answering seriously because half the world has heard it. The desert's surface is a soft crust over sand. Any heavy craft would have pressed ruts into it and non-exist. The figures match, stroke for stroke. The creatures the Nazca painted on their own pottery and wove into their own textiles for centuries. And the stake and cord evidence shows that ordinary people could do this with ordinary tools. But notice the assumption underneath the alien theory that these people could not have done it themselves. They could. The real question was never ability. It was intent. And the leading answer today is about the one thing this desert does not have. Water. Archaeologists who work at Nazca, researchers like Johann Reinhard and Anthony Aveni, now largely read the lines as a ritual landscape, in a desert where rain decides who lives. Many figures are drawn in that same single unbroken line, so you can enter, walk the entire creature, and exit without ever crossing your own path. At the ends of lines and trapezoids, deliberately smashed pottery. Offerings. Many trapezoids run aligned with valleys and ancient watercourses. And hummingbird, spider and monkey are all linked in Andean tradition to fertility and water. So picture it, a whole community single file pacing the body of a giant bird, a prayer you do not say but walk. On this reading the drawings did have an audience above. Not visitors from space, the mountain gods who sent the rivers. It is a theory. It is also the one the desert keeps agreeing with. So why did they stop? Around 1500 years ago the drawing ends. Researchers point to catastrophic El Niño floods, and a Cambridge-led study argues the Nazca had felled the huarango trees whose roots held their valleys together, so when the great rains finally came, they came as ruin. A people who prayed for water may have been destroyed by it, but the desert was not finished speaking. Since 2004, a Japanese team from Yamagata University has been rescanning the plain, and with drones and artificial intelligence they have found hundreds of new figures. 143 announced in 2019, 303 more in 2024. The count has nearly doubled, and many of the new figures are small and sit beside ancient footpaths made to be seen by walkers on the ground. After a century of study, this mystery is still growing, and it is still fragile. Remember the footprint that lasts for centuries. In December 2014, Greenpeace activists marched into the prohibited zone beside the hummingbird with a protest banner and left a scatter of footprints in the crust that conservators say may never fade. In 2018, a truck driver ignored the warning signs and carved tire scars across 3 figures. The Pan-American highway already cuts a lizard in half. The town of Nazca creeps closer every year. 2,000 years of stillness meeting the one force it never evolved to survive, us. So a calendar that mostly wasn't. Runways for visitors who never came. Prayers to gods who answered in the end with a flood. Perhaps the truth is simpler and stranger. Art made perfect for an audience the artists trusted was watching. Were they right? Tell me what you think in the comments and I'll see you in the next unsolved case.